Too. Let's get it. Live from New York on this Wednesday night, November 18th, the NBA draft night, and a flurry of activity around the association with some big names on the move. The Giants get a big win to tighten the NFC East race, and a lot to get to in the world of college football. Here to break it all down with you for the next 90 minutes, the man on the other side of my Zoom screen, Dylan Balsamo. I'm Nick DeLuca. Dylan, a lot to get to tonight, and it all starts in the NBA.
Absolutely a lot to get to tonight. And, you know, we got to get rolling because I have a very strict bedtime that I need to get to. So we got to get rolling. But things have been moving pretty fast in the NBA. This first round is already gone fairly quick.
Well, we'll make sure that our producer, Alex Wolves, is on time. We're in and out of our breaks to make sure that you're in bed by 10:31. So we will adhere to a strict schedule. You mentioned the NBA draft, that in full swing. Picks are flying in. It is Jameis Wiseman who goes number 2 to the Golden State Warriors behind Anthony Edwards, who is the eventual number 1 overall pick. There was some question about those two and who would be the number 1 pick. It was Edwards, the guard out of Georgia. Wiseman going to the Golden State Warriors. Of interest, LaMelo Ball, the 3rd overall pick, going to the Charlotte Hornets. And then Obi Toppin, the forward out of Dayton, 6'9", 220 pounds, the senior. Fordham saw him a year ago. He was the reigning Wooden Award winner, and out of the University of Dayton is the Knicks selection at the 8th overall pick. Dylan, your initial reaction to the selection of Obi Toppin?
Well, you know, like you were saying, you know, we at Fordham got to see a little taste of his talent and his abilities. And, you know, he seemed like a real talent to me. He seemed like someone I would want on my team in any sense. So I'm happy for the Knicks in that sense. I also think he's a good fit for the Knicks. I think he's someone they need not only in terms of how their team works right now. I guess they could really use anybody. But not only does he fit in that sense, I think his mentality will work very well for a team that, for every reason, should have a chip on their shoulder right now. So I like this for the Knicks. Would they want a higher pick? Sure. But I think this is a great get at number 8.
I feel like this was such a weird draft. It reminds me, not to compare this to the draft that produced Anthony Bennett and that whole mess that was a few years back, but there was just not a consensus about the number 1 overall pick. And I think it was for different reasons. Generally, you get a good look at a number of these players. And of course, the pandemic makes workouts more difficult, and to keep tabs on all of these players is not always the easiest thing. Anthony Edwards was one of, if not the best players in all of college basketball, but he decided, because of personal reasons, no fault of him to want to play close to home and at the University of Georgia, but he was not a guy who was on a big-time college basketball stage. The number 2 player and the number 2 pick is Jameis Wiseman, who plays 2 weeks at Memphis, and there are some issues about his eligibility at the university, and he says, no, I'm going to drop out. I'm done. I'm not playing college basketball for the rest of the year, and I'm going to go prepare myself for the NBA draft. So there was a lot of shuffling, a lot of, hey, what are we going to get at the top of this draft? LaMelo Ball falls into that category as well, as a guy who didn't even play college basketball. He spent the year overseas. So it was just a lot to sift through, and the Knicks get their guy at number 8, somebody who I think a lot of people would have projected out of a smaller school in the University of Dayton, who have built a very legitimate program over the last 2 years. But I think that Obi Toppin can be a solid piece for the Knicks going forward, and we'll see how things end up. I think he's got to make himself a better rebounder, a better defender, and he needs to maybe lengthen his game from a shooting aspect. But I think there's something to work with here, and to add to some of the young core that the Knicks are hoping to develop under Tom Thibodeau and Leon Rose. You are hoping that he will mesh well with some of those other young pieces in RJ Barrett.
Absolutely. And, you talk a little bit about Toppin coming from Dayton and the fact that how, that's not usually a school we see a top 10 pick come out of. But, and perhaps a little biased in saying this, in that, we cover Fordham sports and we see this conference all the time, but the A10 is getting really good. A10 men's basketball, Fordham aside, has been outstanding the last few years. And I think this is really just a culmination of that, seeing someone like Toppin end up in the top 10 of the NBA draft. And I think it's a sign of what's to come specifically for the conference. But besides what we've already talked about, you're right. This was really an odd draft. Just these first 10 picks, there was a lot of speculation surrounding it. Just the fact that the Golden State Warriors had the number 2 pick was an oddity in itself. There were talks of trades. None really ended up happening, but there was a lot surrounding specifically this first round tonight. And I think if we're talking about the Knicks specifically, I don't think you could be happier with how their number 8 pick turned out.
For sure. So they're happy with the guy that they get at number 8. Again, Obi Toppin, the forward out of the University of Dayton, 6'9", 220 pounds, and the reigning Wooden Award winner as the most outstanding player in college basketball. So the Knicks get a good player, and there are a number of good players as we transition to what is going on for those who are actually in the NBA, and that's a number of players who are on the move. A couple of trades that have been made early on. Drew Holiday packing his bags, headed to the Milwaukee Bucks. Chris Paul is on his way to the desert on a trade to the Phoenix Suns, and some speculation about potential movement for both, one of, if not both, James Harden and Russell Westbrook. Let's talk about the Nets, the Philadelphia 76ers, as potential landing spots there. I want to start with the trades that have actually happened, and maybe with Drew Holiday and the impact that he will have with the Milwaukee Bucks and Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the Bucks, they were a team, and this goes without saying mostly, but they were already a team that was already really good. And, that's not much of a hot take. I'm actually a little chilly as I say it. But, he is just an extra addition to a team that now is even that much fiercer. So, I would worry playing them. I already had, and, it really sets them as a team that is saying to the rest of the conference, we're not messing around here.
No, and that's for sure. They're not messing around, and they're trying to capitalize on this championship window. Of course, Giannis's contract is up after the end of this year, and so is Drew Holiday. So they're pushing the chips to the middle of the table and making a statement and saying that we're going to try and compete for a championship, even if this is our last opportunity to do so. They haven't gotten the commitment from Giannis, but I think they're approaching it the right way. And it was interesting because this situation reminds me a little bit of how Cleveland played their last year with LeBron James, and they were guarding their lottery pick that they acquired in the trade for Kyrie Irving with their lives and saying, look, We have not gotten a guarantee that LeBron is going to resign, so we want to protect our future. But at the end of the day, without a star like LeBron James, without a star like Giannis Antetokounmpo, you are not going to be able to rebuild things or compete for a championship. So to me, the right way to approach all of this is to push your chips to the middle of the table and worry about what happens later, because you hold on to that 8th overall pick as Cleveland did. They took Colin Sexton. Now, Colin Sexton is not a bad NBA player. He is a serviceable guard in this league, but he is not anyone who is a difference maker enough to make Cleveland a relevant team even in the Eastern Conference. So they held on to that pick that may have stopped them from gaining an extra piece that might have allowed them to, say, compete with Golden State in that last championship run. Maybe they would have lost anyway, but they would have given themselves a chance. And to me, that is the distinction where you do make that trade. You do push all your chips to the middle of the table and do whatever it takes to make yourself as competitive as possible. And you know what? If there is a trade on the table in Milwaukee and you think you could go acquire James Harden, you give up the next 4 first-round picks that you didn't already give up to do so, because you really need to go for it when the opportunity presents itself. Toronto is, I think, the best example of that. They had no assurance that Kawhi Leonard was going to stay. Guess what? He didn't, but they were able to take the risks and build the team around him. They needed a star. They got that performance out of him during that playoff run, and they walked away with a banner hanging from the rafters. And I think that's the best way to approach this. You need to put your chips at the middle of the table. You need to go all in. That's how the NBA works. It's a star-driven league, and teams need to be aggressive in trying to acquire those stars, even if it's not going to be a long-term commitment or a long-term plan.
That is what you were concluding with there is right what I was about to say. And it goes to show, more than any other sport, you look at the NBA, you have 5 guys from a team on the court at one time. You got 12 guys in your roster. There's only 2 rounds of the draft. It's not a lot of players. This is a star-driven league. And, you know, as weird as this sounds to say, the shiniest car usually wins best in show in the NBA. That is just kind of how it goes. The biggest hog will get the win at the state fair. So, you know, if you're a team like the Bucks, Giannis is incredible and is a player that you and I are going to be telling our future generations of the DeLucas and Balsamos all about. But if you can do more to get that win, to get that championship, especially for a city like Milwaukee, why would you not go all in? This is it's a league where if you do it right, you can rebuild quickly. And that's just how the league is set up, at least right now. And it looks like for the foreseeable future, which is why I'm not worried about a team like the Warriors. But at the end of the day, why would you not put your chips all in? Like I'm all with the Bucks on this.
We'll see how the moves work out, and we'll see if there are additional moves as well. Bogdanovich, that trade with Sacramento looks to be on the mend, if not about to fall through. And there's some discussion about that on social media right now. Not 100% confirmed, but it does not look like he will be heading to the Bucks via trade. So that one falls through. Drew Holiday on his way to Milwaukee. Chris Paul is also on the move. He will be traded to the Phoenix Suns from Oklahoma City, who are creating an impressive bounty of draft picks, and their rebuild, Sam Presti getting a lot for him and others to try and restock the cupboard with a young and in transition Oklahoma City Thunder team. But Chris Paul to Phoenix, and to pair him with Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton, a team that really impressed despite not making the playoffs in the bubble. What do you think Chris Paul will bring to the Phoenix Suns now that he is going to be paired with some of the young talent?
Well, first of all, to what you were saying about the Thunder, yeah, that's a team you really got to give credit to. I think a trade like this is almost a removal of themselves from the ego to realize, look, this is where we stand in the league right now. If we want to be where we want to be, we're going to have to be honest with ourselves. And they did, and they're reaping the benefits of what I think was a great trade. I would argue on both sides because, you know, talking about the Phoenix Suns, Chris Paul is a great addition. They are a team that is, I think, in a place to make that leap to the next level, and they just needed that extra push. And a guy like Chris Paul, once he's done doing commercials, it can do that for you. So I like this move truly for both sides, but I think the Suns are going to really benefit from this.
I was really impressed by the season that Chris Paul put together with Oklahoma City, because that was a team that no one had any expectation for to even be relevant in the playoffs. He was left for dead in Houston, and it was all about how he could not play with James Harden and he wasn't doing enough. And all this dude did in 70 games was average 17.5 points, 5 rebounds, and just under 7 assists.
Yeah.
And he reminded everybody at age 36 and 37 that he can still get it done. 35. But Chris Paul is still one of the best guards in the NBA, and he does it a little bit differently from maybe the new age guard that we are seeing, although he has done a much better job, and a credit to him for expanding his game in becoming more of a perimeter player and adding that ability to shoot to his game. But what he did in Oklahoma City to get everybody else involved, their young players, what he did for their culture was just incredible. And to see them make the playoffs and to see them be in a better position than Houston was when Houston gives him up and the additional picks to exchange him for Russell Westbrook was pretty darn impressive. And I think that this automatically makes Phoenix a playoff team because Chris Paul is really that good. And we saw and we've seen that this is a star-driven league, and Phoenix has one in Devin Booker. Devin Booker is, the way he played in the bubble was extremely impressive. And with DeAndre Ayton and with some of the other pieces that they have, Chris Paul is going to make a huge difference with that team. And with the basketball running through him and his court vision and the way that he can give way to Devin Booker and maybe take some pressure off of him and allow him to create more open shots, I really think that this can be a team that maybe you're not talking about as a top tier contender in the West, but I think you might be talking about them in tier 2, where on a good day, they can maybe push to win a playoff series or two in the same sort of way that you're talking about the Utah Jazz or the Denver Nuggets. They're not to the Lakers or the Clippers level, or you would think, without the Clippers choking away a playoff series. But I think that Phoenix is really one of the better teams in the West, and Chris Paul is going to make a world of difference.
Yeah. Tier 2 in the West, like you said, right now, perhaps tier 1 in the next couple of years. That is yet to be seen. But if you're Devin Booker right now, the feeling of the sigh of relief must be a sense of, oh, wonderful. It's not, it won't just be me. We've been playing tennis with this phrase back and forth for the last few minutes now, but yeah, it's a star-driven league. And the more you can get, the more relief it is to the stars. The more, if you put Meryl Streep in a movie with Jack Nicholson, that's less Meryl has to do. It's less she has to carry the film as a top-notch actor. I'm getting off topic, but you're absolutely right about Chris Paul this season too. With Oklahoma City, it's the mark of a true great athlete to be able to adjust your game like that and to stay in the conversation. And again, I think it's a credit to Oklahoma City for having that this season and still understanding it was like it'd be great to see things continue to happen for us with him, but we gotta acknowledge that we need to move forward as a team, as a franchise. So I'm very happy for the Thunder. They were able to make this move, and like I said, they certainly reap the benefits. And I'm happy if I'm Chris Paul. I'm happy if I'm Devin Booker. This was a good move.
Thunder adding just a ridiculous number of draft picks. They added to that war chest with a trade today for Al Horford from the Philadelphia 76ers. That first round pick will come in 2025, in addition to selection number 34 overall tonight Philadelphia trying to clear out some salary cap space to potentially make a play and give them at least some flexibility at some trades or free agents going forward. So a move that worked out for them didn't necessarily see the fit with Al Horford in Philadelphia. They move off of him, and Oklahoma City eats the contract. They've got a lot of room with cap space and moving off of Chris Paul, and then add to just the ridiculous number of first-round draft picks. I saw something on Twitter where it's going to be the New Orleans Pelicans and then Oklahoma City Thunder. Just pick after pick after pick in the next number of NBA drafts. So now
it'll feel more like an expansion draft.
Exactly right. They're just going to be those two. They'll just be picking over and over and over again because at some point they're just going to have all the draft picks. So let's go to some of the trades that are speculative, that have not happened. And we're talking about the Houston Rockets in passing. James Harden has apparently made it known that he might want out of Houston. Russell Westbrook not exactly happy there as well. There was speculation that the Rockets may try and blow this up just because of their financial situation. They're clearly a tier 2, tier 3 type of team, not a team that you would expect to come close to competing in the West right now. And they don't have much ability to maneuver with the trade they made for Russell Westbrook. They're out of draft picks. They're out of salary cap space. So now it's about time to blow this thing up. Russell Westbrook and Harden, again, both saying they're not happy. And it seems as though, at least in Harden's case, that the Brooklyn Nets and the Philadelphia 76ers are two of the top teams on his wish list.
Absolutely. And I will say, just, our ability to study the Nets being so close to them in New York, you can see why someone would want to be a part of that culture. It's just fun to watch them. It's fun to talk about the Nets right now. It's exciting. There's something in the air. But in terms of the Rockets, and I'm thinking about their fans right now because they must feel really defeated and disappointed because this is a weird time. They must really feel in a corner. These two former MVPs don't want to play for them anymore. There's a changing of the guards in the front office. So, but I advise them to have patience and understand that losing these two guys is probably the best thing that's going to happen for them for a little while, to open up that cap space and to have faith that this is for the betterment of the franchise. Why would you want guys playing on your team who don't want to play there? And, Harden and Westbrook are, in terms of the environment of that team, they needed each other in order for things to work. So the removal of one, you kind of got to get rid of the other. So, I think the fact that the two of them have decided it's time for them to leave Houston is for the betterment of the Rockets. So, almost good for them.
I think from Houston's perspective, Russell Westbrook is certainly somebody you can move off of. But at the same time, I'm doing whatever I can to try and keep James Harden because I think he's one of the best players in the NBA. That's no secret. He is.
Yeah.
He's been in MVP contention. So that's where I sit on that. It's just difficult because they don't have a lot of room to make moves. And maybe if they were able to trade Russell Westbrook, they could potentially make a play for somebody when free agency comes around and they feel like there's somebody who's good to pair with James Harden in a future year and accelerate the rebuild because you've already got the one star in place. But if James Harden doesn't want to be there, it also puts them in a difficult spot because $50 million a year talks pretty loudly and he just turned that down. So at some level, if he wants to move on, the Rockets may or may not have a choice to do that as well. And it would be really interesting to me to see him play somewhere else. I would be fascinated by either of those destinations, be it the Nets or Philadelphia, in particular the Nets, to see how the heck that would work out with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving and James Harden and one basketball. That to me would be a sight to see with a first-year head coach. Mike D'Antoni's there. There's a lot to unpack with Brooklyn if that were to happen. Philadelphia may be a better spot for him because Ben Simmons is a guy who facilitates, but is not the biggest shooter. So he's going to look to try and make plays. And this is not to say that one of Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid wouldn't be going the other direction for Philadelphia, because they don't have a ton of draft capital either. And it may stand to reason that one of those guys would have to go to get Harden coming back the other way. But let's pretend that they're able to pull it off with the nuts and bolts of Philadelphia's roster still in place. I think as a distributor, Ben Simmons can play well with James Harden, and the role that Joel Embiid can flourish in as a big man, and he'll get his touches in the post and can extend, and as a rebounder make his impact when he's healthy. But it just seems to me that Brooklyn would be such a difficult fit for three guys who just make their money, and they're great players. And it's not to deny that they wouldn't be a great team, but at some point there's only one basketball, and are you really reducing the effectiveness of one of those players? We saw this with Chris Bosh in Miami. We saw this with Kevin Love in Cleveland talking about big threes. There are just some guys who aren't necessarily meant to play off the ball, and it doesn't feel like one of Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, or James Harden are one of those guys. It worked great in Golden State because Klay Thompson doesn't need to handle the ball. He's a big catch and shoot guy and can do it that way. Those guys aren't that same type of player, and it feels like you're really risking diminishing the effectiveness of one of those guys in favor of bringing along another star.
Absolutely, and I'll make this quick in that, for one thing, like you were saying, Harden going to Brooklyn, that turns that whole situation into a media conglomerate in itself that you and I, growing up in the late 2000s, early 2010s, have become quite accustomed to. But let's be honest with ourselves. What James Harden wants right now is to win. He wants that championship. And I think you're right in saying if he wants to win right now, I think the 76ers are the best option. There's just too much going on in Brooklyn for it to happen right away. It's just not going to happen that first year. So, but the 76ers have so much talent, and if they can keep everything together, that might be the place to be.
It will certainly be interesting. I don't want to say that Brooklyn's not a good destination, because at the end of the day, like, James Harden, Kevin Durant, and Kyrie Irving is as good as it gets. I mean, those are three of the top 10 players in the NBA. I don't know that Kyrie is a top 5, but he's definitely a top 10. Yeah. So Harden and Durant are top 5. So that's 3 of the top 10 and 2 of the top 5. That is incredibly difficult to contend with. There is going to be no team that runs out a roster even close to that, even as good as the Lakers were this year. LeBron and Anthony Davis as good as they are. That's Kyrie, Harden, and KD. That's as good as it gets. It's just, do you feel like they're going to be happy? They're going to be willing to play that style of basketball. And Klay Thompson and Steph Curry were the glue in that big three. Guys who are unselfish, who want to shoot the basketball, and they're not as ball dominant. That's not to say that Steph Curry doesn't handle the ball, but he's a guy who will shoot. Klay Thompson is really just a catch and shoot guy, and Kevin Durant is a perfect fit with all three of them there. I just think it's going to be more of a challenge with those three if you put them together, and that Philadelphia, for James Harden being as effective of a player as he can be, Philadelphia has to be the better destination. That said, I think that Brooklyn's the better team in those two scenarios.
Absolutely. I think, like, in terms of next year, the Nets are, it's like the Beatles, where, you know, John has his songs that he writes and he wants to do those songs. Paul has the songs that he writes, he wants to do those songs. They got to fight over when are they going to do each other's songs. Then George is like, hey, I want to write songs too. And John and Paul are like, stay out of this, George. And then Ringo is Mike D'Antoni because he's just there. So it becomes an issue, and, you know, you can have all the talent you want, but at the end of the day, there needs to be a glue that's there, and obviously it's not there yet in Brooklyn. If they can figure it out this year, great. And if James Harden is there, then good for him, and actually good for all of us, because that'd be entertaining to watch. But not so sure just yet.
The Boston Celtics are now on the clock. We are at pick number 14 tonight. The NBA draft and one-on-one at night roll on. Stay with us. Athletics call-in show. We're a half an hour in, an hour to go here on this NBA draft night. Dylan Balsamo, the other guy on my Zoom screen. I'm Nick DeLuca. We're going to get into some of the NBA draft. The Knicks making Obi Toppin the 8th selection in the NBA draft. We'll talk him. We'll talk Anthony Edwards at the top, Jameis Wiseman, and some others as the names continue to fly off the board and NBA dreams come true. This is always one of the most fun times of the year to see all these guys and realize their dreams becoming NBA players. But getting into it from an organizational perspective, Dylan, let's start with Anthony Edwards. He is the number 1 overall pick, so we'll go to him first. As we mentioned off the top, it was difficult to get a read on exactly who was going to be the number 1 pick. You're not sure exactly how guys are going to fit with certain teams. There was talk about how Minnesota was going to listen up till the end of the clock for trade offers and see if anyone else were interested in doing that. They stick with the pick. It is Anthony Edwards, a guy who was the number 1 recruit coming into college basketball last year, played at Georgia, not this big-time program, did have success, led all players in the SEC with 19 points a game. He is explosive. He's got elite length at 6'3", 225. So somebody that I think a lot of people like a lot, but the question is he a dude paired with D'Angelo Russell and Karl Anthony Towns that can add an extra dimension to Minnesota?
So a couple things. First of all, while Georgia may not be a team that's usually on our radar as having a top 10 pick, no, let alone a number 1 overall pick, the SEC is, in itself, it's a tough basketball conference. It's just as you'd expect it to be. It's not the ACC, but it's still pretty good. You wouldn't think of Georgia as being one of the top programs there, but, they're still playing in that conference. But here's the thing. This is not a Zion year, and nobody expected it to be. It's just not how it is. So if you're in Minnesota and there's an idea of one of these 2 guys probably, and you're still hearing trade options, nothing you're really liking, I can understand if it's a judgment call, just a quick game time decision, a flip of the coin, closing your eyes and doing a zigzag with your fingers, and then you point at one. It doesn't sound like something you'd want to do to run an NBA franchise, but when the difference between your options is that slim, I certainly don't think Edwards was a bad choice. But I can understand why, I can understand why they went with him. I would have understood why they wouldn't have. So I think it was just a very quick judgment call for Minnesota.
I like the pick because I think that he has the biggest upside potential of anyone in the NBA draft. He's a dude who can become a star as a shooting guard and a shooter of the basketball, and a guy who can flat out score. And that, to me, is so valuable in today's NBA. In addition to just being able to score, creating your chances to score. It's about creating offense, and Anthony Edwards is explosive. He is long. He can do that. I think the fit is also something that is really important to take into consideration when you're looking about the team that he's going to in Minnesota. I think the only other reasonable conversation that Minnesota could have at number 1 would be Jameis Wiseman, but they already have Karl Anthony Towns. So to have 2 big men in that system, it's just not the way that the NBA is trending right now. You're not playing big ball, it's small ball. So to have 2 guys who you are heavily invested in at bigger positions, and I think Karl Anthony Towns can play outside a little bit, but it's not his strength, and you're not trying to lose value on that draft pick as well. So I think this is a perfect fit. He's a guy who can handle the basketball when you need him to, but they have D'Angelo Russell, so he won't necessarily have to. He can play at the 2. You can get him the scoring opportunities. You can get him the ball and get him involved. He will score the basketball, be a great compliment for D'Angelo Russell, who's going to run the point. He's going to take his shots. He's going to set things up as well. And you've got Karl Anthony Towns to space out the floor. I think this was the right pick just from a fit perspective more so than anything else. And I think that Golden State, as we transition to pick number 2 on the board, gets it right as well, because we're talking about a team that needs a guard. You don't want to pick a redundant player in a big man. Jameis Wiseman at 7'1", 240 is huge, and Golden State needs a big man. They've got the guards. They've got Klay Thompson. You're hoping that he's going to be healthy with the report that came out about a potential leg injury tonight. But Steph Curry, as a 2-time league MVP, is as good as it gets. And with those two, you're looking for an added dimension down low. They have not had a significant rim protector. Draymond Green doesn't really do that. He's more of a facilitator and a small guy. They want someone who can fill that role of being a rim protector and a rebounder. Jameis Wiseman was a great pick for them at number 2, because just like at pick number 1, he fills a big need for Golden State.
100%. And, to round out our talk about Minnesota, I think I also would have gone with Edwards. I think picking Wiseman would have been more of a let's draft him and then talk trade after we make the pick. But, again, I think in terms of the team they have right now in Minnesota, Edwards is the better pick. And, like we're saying, Wiseman was absolutely exactly who you want if you're Golden State on your team. They're a team, the Warriors, that I'm not particularly worried about. They're going to be fine. But they did absolutely need someone who can, a big man in the paint. They can shoot. We all know that. They can shoot just about as good as, especially from distance, just about as good as any team that the NBA has ever seen. So this is a great move. Wiseman, I think, is the ideal pick if you're the Warriors. And now it's a matter of blending him into the very clear mix and style that Golden State plays in. Maybe that'll take some time, but I don't think it will. So, this is good for Golden State. They're going to be fine.
I think the key to Wiseman being successful with Golden State is that he's so athletic. He is not someone who you are sitting there and relying on to be a stretch forward as somebody who is exceptionally proficient at shooting outside. That's not his game as sort of a traditional center. But he is good enough to run the floor without any question. And that is the most important thing with the style of basketball that Golden State plays. They're run and shoot. They want to get out and go and move in transition and beat you with their speed and get the shots that they want to get. So it's important that they get someone who can rim protect, who is able to get rebounds and fill that role for them, but also somebody that can keep up with the pace and the style that they want to play. For example, Joel Embiid, as good of a player as he is not somebody who would fit in Golden State. He has that outside range as a plus, but just from a moving up and down the court perspective, that pace of play is not something that would ever play to the strength of Joel Embiid. That to me is very different from the player that Golden State is getting in Jameis Wiseman, because he's an athletic freak. He's got a good feel for the game on both ends and good instincts as well. So I'm just excited to see where Golden State goes from here, because we were talking about teams that are going to be contenders and the top tier contenders in the West. If Jameis Wiseman turns out to be the player I think a lot of people feel that he can be, he is going to add such a dynamic dimension to Golden State. And you're hoping that Klay Thompson's injury is not too serious and that he is healthy. But if you think about having Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and what made them successful even before Kevin Durant got there, and to add someone who is that big-time rim protector and can rebound and add that athleticism and size to Golden State, they have really picked up a good player for them.
100%. And I think, a guy like Wiseman, when you look at, to me at least, when you look at someone of that size and to be that athletic, that's clearly the mark of not only just a talented athlete, but more than anything, a hard worker. You know, someone of that stature doesn't need to be fast, doesn't need to be like that, but he is, because he wanted that extra facet to his game. Clearly, at some point in his life, he decided that this is something I also want in my game. And I think, you know, we've been talking for a few minutes now just about how good of a fit he is for Golden State. And, you know, as much as he would need to adjust to their game, which I think he will be just fine at doing. Another thing he does is he protects them on a night when perhaps the shots are not falling Steph's way, and the shooting is just not going the way they want it to happen, which you could argue happened a little bit this year. Wiseman is a guy that can protect that, protect the team from nights when that happens. He is able to supply something that, you know, you could argue they didn't really need, but now they have it. That's an extra facet to their game as a team, and it's incredible.
LaMelo Ball, the number 3 overall pick, he's headed to Charlotte as a guy who had some varied reviews from a number of draft evaluators, some very high on him, some not so much. And we will see how he works out in Charlotte as well, with some of their rebuilding efforts with Michael Jordan at the helm and trying to get things turned around. They have not found a ton of success. Before we move on to the Knicks draft pick and circle back to Obi Toppin and the plans for the Knickerbockers for the remainder of this draft, they hold pick number 23 after making a trade earlier today. There has been another trade. Ricky Rubio, who was on his way from Phoenix to Minnesota because of the Chris Paul trade, has just been traded from the Oklahoma City Thunder back to the Minnesota Timberwolves, where he began his career, along with picks number 25 and 28 for a package that includes the number 17 overall pick. So the Minnesota Timberwolves moving up, and we'll be getting Ricky Rubio back as well from the Oklahoma City Thunder. So he will be on the move once again, traded twice in the same week. So let's go back to Obi Toppin and our excitement for him, and also what the Knicks plan to do, potentially trading that pick, and what their sort of outlook is for the remainder of the offseason with Leon Rose and Tom Thibodeau coming in. And you're talking about, are they going to be a player in free agency or try and build through the draft? Is Obi Toppin, and I think this is probably the biggest question for the Knicks and for fans of their team, is he a guy who's going to be a difference maker enough? I think that there's the general consensus that this is a guy who's going to be good and is going to come in ready to play. He is an older player at 22 years old, and is not necessarily a traditional one and done college basketball player. So he'll come in, and you're confident he's going to know what he's doing. Well-coached program at Dayton with Anthony Grant. But is this the guy with the superstar potential or the franchise-changing potential that the Knicks have been looking for the last number of years?
Well, I think the important thing to know is, well, here's the thing. He's going to win you some basketball games. He's going to do that. He is a talented player, and he will certainly supply that for the Knicks. But my issue with it seems like we feel this way every draft year with the New York Knicks. They end up getting a pick in the top 10, and they draft somebody, and it's somebody we like, usually somebody who has some talent. And there's a part of you that thinks it was like, oh, well, that there you go, problem solved. Here we go. We're in the right direction now. But with a team that is in the situation that the New York Knicks find themselves in, it's going to take a lot more than anybody on the court, honestly, to solve their problems. They do have some changes at the helm in the front office for this coming season. So I think that would have more an effect on the Knicks turning things around than anything else. But there's still work to be done there. I think what we've seen with the Nets in the last couple of years is a change in the culture, the change in the mindset, the change of how we as fans, as you and I being in the media, how we view the team and the franchise. I think it's vital. I think it's underrated how important that is. And the Knicks need that more than they need a first round draft pick that is incredibly talented. So my issue with the Knicks is that they put their arms behind their head and go, here we go. We can get through this now. The work's not nearly done.
No, for sure it's not, and I'll be interested to see how they approach their offseason. Julius Randle on the books right now. Would they think about moving on from him and potentially making a trade? Bobby Portis is on their roster as well, and some decisions to be made with him and Taj Gibson with player options. But Obi Toppin is the newest member of the New York Knicks, and we'll see what this jam-packed offseason has for them at MSG and see if they can turn it around. Obi Toppin, hopefully for them, will be a player who will lead to that process of finally getting the Knicks back to being relevant a little bit. The NBA is better when the Knicks are better. Unfortunately, we haven't seen that for a number of years. Hard to say one way or the other. Obi Toppin's going to play for them. We'll see what type of player that he turns out to be. I think it's a consensus that you're happy with the pick right now, but no games have been played as of yet, and it's a wait-and-see approach. The NBA draft is continuing on. So is Nightly One-on-One. We'll be back with some talk about the Giants potentially re-entering the race in the NFC. Stay with us. Taking you until 10:30 on this NBA Draft Wednesday. As always, we want to hear from you. So if you've got something for us, we will get to it in the comment section. As always, just drop it in the comments here on Twitter, and we will get to whatever you guys want to talk about. If it is a question about the NBA draft, the NBA free agency outlook, trades, or the NFL, we're going to get to the Giants here. So anything you guys want to talk about, comment on Twitter, and we will get to it. So let's go to the Giants, who, if you're 3-7, normally that's a bad thing, and it's not a good thing for the New York Giants, but that generally means that you are way, way, way out of playoff contention. And that is not the case for Big Blue, who picked up a massive 27-17 win at home over the Philadelphia Eagles in a game that puts them just a game and a half out of first place. I can't believe I'm saying that, but first place in the dreadful NFC East. The Giants were able to get stuff done offensively, more encouraging to see the rushing attack and the ground game getting going. Daniel Jones, 9 carries for 64 yards. Wayne Gallman, 18 for 53, but does score 2 touchdowns. And Daniel Jones, efficient throwing the football, 21 of 28 for 244 yards, a quarterback rating of 91.4. This is a big win for the Giants, who somehow are in division contention. I can't believe we are talking about this, but they have a real shot to potentially take home the NFC East if they can get on a roll here.
Well, Sunday, what was really, to be honest, odd about it is that the Giants played like a division contender. They're not just contending for the division right now. They looked like it on Sunday against Philadelphia. And, you know, we talk about this division being wide open. The NFC East, you know, we've talked about it for years, how it has not been the best division in football for a while. But in you and I, Nick, discussed this earlier today, just like the reasons why this year it is just absolutely atrocious, borderline unwatchable. But, you know, the Giants took advantage of that this week, and if they play their cards right, might continue to.
The difficult thing for the NFC East, and no one is sitting there and saying that any of these teams are very good, but when you match up against the NFC West and the AFC North, you are playing two of the best divisions in football. And if you look up and down those schedules and the teams that you're going to play, maybe if you're catching San Francisco now with Nick Mullins at quarterback and the litany of injuries that they have sustained, the Giants did not, you can at best expect 2 wins out of the 8 games that you're playing against those 2 divisions. You're not beating Pittsburgh or Cleveland or Baltimore, and you're not beating Seattle or Arizona. You're not beating those teams, the Rams. It's just, you're not going to. So it's just an interesting match here where you've got teams that aren't very good playing against 2 of the best divisions. And unless you're taking down those 2 teams, Cincinnati or San Francisco, there are just no wins available. So it's a difficult situation for all the NFC's teams to be in. But when you look at the Giants, and it's been encouraging for them the last couple of weeks because they have really, it seems, found their footing or have started playing better as of late. And I think that is really related to an improvement up front, a change today at offensive line coach. There were reports about Joe Judge increasing his attention to the offensive line and some issues that were there, and a potential disagreement between offensive line coach and head coach. And something was said about a potential fight that has been refuted to just some nasty language. So we're not sure exactly what went down there, but the offensive line coach out in New York in favor of Joe Judge and a new assistant coach there. But you like what you've seen out of the Giants, and you feel like they're headed in the right direction into the bye week, as odd as it sounds, with them being at 3-7. But you're confident that they're well coached. You're confident that they're headed in the right direction with Joe Judge. And now you feel like, man, oh man, some of the early season losses when you start 0-5, some of the games that they felt like they could have won against the Cowboys or against Washington early on in the season, you're sitting there and just you feel like it's almost a missed opportunity, but they're there. And Philadelphia, I got to tell you, looks terrible as a team that should be the best in this division. I mean, they're the most talented. They are not terribly healthy, but they're healthy enough. And Carson Wentz just looks like a shell of himself. 21 to 37, 208, no touchdowns, no interceptions, a quarterback rating of 37. Their offensive line is undoubtedly a huge problem, but the way that the Eagles played on Sunday was just unbelievably bad. This is a team that was winning a Super Bowl 3 years back, and you're looking at them right now and saying, what the heck happened?
Yeah. The Eagles are not a team that anyone expected to be a Super Bowl contender this year, but at least better than this. In a division that has looked this bad, they should be crushing it. They should be flying high. And, sticking with the Giants, because all this concerns me a little bit. For one thing, the rumors of that altercation that you mentioned that came out today sounded like it was taken right out of a script for a Sopranos episode. So it was a little concerning. But my issue with the Giants, I worry on behalf of Giants fans. I know them well, and the reason I do is because I am one of them. That this can the fact that there is the potential for success this season, because one of these NFC East teams is going to host a playoff game. They're going to get annihilated, but they're going to host a playoff game. So my worry for Giants fans, and really the Giants franchise in particular, is that they're going to take this season as a beacon of hope if things turn out well. They're going to take this as a division championship to hang in the rafters and remember when really this was just a complete accident if they end up in the playoffs. It's Harry Potter's name being thrown in the goblet of fire. It was not supposed to happen. And if you're a Giants fan, you think, well, I guess everything's good. Daniel Jones has exceeded my expectations of him, and looks like we're going to be fine for the next few years. When really, they're not in a place to do that. The 2020 year, ironically, is taking away our 2020 vision, and we got to take those glasses off and see and make sure we understand that none of these NFC East teams, none of the four of them, are in any place to be satisfied with however this year turns out.
No, I don't think anyone's satisfied with the Giants being 3-7, and they're just happy that they're in a playoff race because this division is so incredibly bad. And
yeah.
I don't think there's any denying that there are changes that need to be made. And one of the biggest questions is still, do they have the answer at quarterback? Are the Giants going to potentially move off of Daniel Jones and see what they could find elsewhere and in the draft, and if that is something that would be worth their while? Now, I think if they make the playoffs, they're just kind of taking themselves out of that contention. That's a difficult spot to be in based upon a finish of getting to the postseason. But we'll see. It's just I think that Giants fans are encouraged because it's been so long and it's been so difficult over the past number of years with Pat Shurmur and Ben McAdoo and the debacles that have been those tenures as Giants head coaches. And this is a team that has really struggled to win games, and they've found a way. They feel like they are headed in the right direction. So to me, that's the most encouraging part of this. But that's not to deny that they really struggled at the beginning of this season, and their offensive line was brutal for a number of weeks and still hasn't become a unit that you're relying on. Their defense has done a good job, but they lack explosive weapons on offense and a quarterback who's not an exceptional playmaker. So they're hoping that either those guys can grow into those types of players or they're going to have to make adjustments. I don't know that it changes the idea that Dave Gettleman will be gone at the end of this year. I think that's still consistent with what a lot of people would expect going forward. There's one last thing I want to get to here, because Philadelphia's schedule as the team that still, I think, has to remain sort of the favorite as you're looking at their roster as being the best team in this division. They've got a really difficult schedule going forward. On Sunday, they play at Cleveland. Then they'll play Seattle on Monday Night Football, at Green Bay in Week 13, against New Orleans at home in Week 14, at Arizona in week 15. That's a brutal schedule. I don't know, aside from maybe winning this week on the road against Cleveland, that's 5 straight losses for me. So now you're talking about the Eagles being 3-10-1. They might be out, and I don't know if they can find a way to squeak a win in there. This game against Cleveland is massive, and you never know. It's any given Sunday, and the Eagles, as bad as they've been, have the potential to run into a win where Carson Wentz gets hot. This team plays up to its potential. But if the Eagles, with this gauntlet of a schedule, and they'll finish up with Dallas and Washington, 2 winnable games, if they're not able to turn things around there, this is an absolutely wide open division that the Giants can win.
You know what? They really can. And, you know, it goes without saying that most of those teams the Eagles have to play, with the exception of, I think, the Seahawks, everybody else in the division is going to have to play as well. So that is one other extra game that they're not going to be favored in. But yeah, it's going to be a very difficult road for the rest of the season for the Eagles. And they have it seems they've been on a downward trend. You know, if losing to the Giants is anything, it is a sign of a downward trend. And the Giants do seem to be on an upward trend. And at this point in the season, in any season, let alone in the year 2020, it is going to be about who's getting hot at the right time. And you could argue that's been the key to the Eagles' last 2 great playoff runs, including their Super Bowl, was getting hot at the right time. Looks like they're cooling down at the right time right now. Not that they were ever hot. If they were ever hot, it was with a high temperature that should be taken to the hospital with. It's a very sick Eagle. But at the end of the day, it's a sign for concern. And if I'm an Eagles fan right now, I am not looking forward to the rest of this season. I'm not.
I don't mean to give Giants fans hope, because I don't know that they are a great football team. I think that early on it was especially a struggle, but at the same time, this is a division that is absolutely wide open, and you feel like they are headed in the right direction, and they have as good a chance as anyone to win this division, although their schedule is not easy going forward. The Eagles is brutal. And you feel like if the Giants can find a few wins along the road here, that they have got a legitimate shot to take home this NFC East title and host a home playoff game, as ridiculous as that sounds. We'll have to take a quick break here on One-on-One. We'll be back with more. We'll talk some college football. Michigan, Indiana, Cincinnati as a contender, Jim Harbaugh's job security, Ohio State and Indiana, as we roll on here on this One-on-One on a Wednesday night.
Yo. Yo. Yo.
Back here on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show on this Wednesday night. It is NBA draft night. We have another trade to report. The Clippers are trading Landry Shamet to the Nets for the 19th overall pick. It's a three-way deal that includes the Detroit Pistons as well. Luke Kennard will be heading to the Clippers, according to ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski. So some trades and some movement as the NBA draft continues. Some interesting stuff there, but we got to get to some college football. And there are some pretty significant stories that are going on right now with Indiana and Cincinnati, two teams that are not traditional powerhouses or really contenders at all, who have played some really good football as of late. And it's Ohio State and Indiana this weekend in a Big Ten matchup. And then staying in the Big Ten, Michigan was dreadful last week. They were just... It was really incredible to watch, quite frankly, how unprepared they looked on Saturday against Wisconsin, and Jim Harbaugh's potential future as both the head coach at Michigan going forward, and would an NFL franchise potentially take a chance on him as their head coach. But let's start with Ohio State and Indiana as a pretty big matchup this week. Indiana 4-0 and a team that has played some really good defense so far this year. But this one, to me, feels a lot like a Georgia and Alabama matchup that we saw earlier this season, where you feel like Indiana is playing very good defense. They're not terribly explosive on offense. They also haven't seen an offense like what Ohio State and Justin Fields are going to throw at them. And this is going to be a difficult task for Indiana going up against one of the best three teams in college football in the Ohio State Buckeyes.
Absolutely. Indiana has played very well this season. And I think, having them this high up in the rankings and talking about them in this way, unfortunately might be the result of the fact of how weird of a college football season this has been, with games being postponed. And, a week like this past week when most of the top 10 teams weren't playing, and the teams that were playing got an even brighter national spotlight. It sheds a light on the teams that do get the chance to play, and Indiana has been very good, but they don't have a shot against Ohio State. They just don't. Indiana has played very well in the games that they have played. And, I hope, who knows how many bowl games are going to get played this year, but I hope Indiana gets a good bowl game because they can put on a show against the right team. But that team is not Ohio State. It's just not. Their difference in yardage per game is over 150 yards. It's just two teams that have been playing two different games all season meeting, and one of these teams is just more dominant than the other team. It's just the reality of it. So I love Indiana, and I'm rooting for them for the rest of the season, and I'm rooting for them in this game, honestly. But I wouldn't put money on it.
No, you're probably not going to put money on it. If you are, the spread is 20.5. The over/under is 66.5. So you may feel like Indiana has a chance to cover. I don't know that I'd pick them to cover either, because Ohio State is really that good. And the offense that they run with Justin Fields is incredible. They are just so good and explosive offensively, and you feel like they're really well coached too with Ryan Day at the helm and what they can run at you with Teague in the backfield and some of the weapons that they have on the outside with Wilson. So I like what Ohio State has done. I think they are right now a top 3 team in college football. Ohio State, that being in Clemson and Alabama, the top there. I know Notre Dame beat Clemson, but I'm not terribly high on them with the backup quarterback. I think they deserve to make the playoff. I think they will. I think those are going to be the 4 that will ultimately be fighting for the college football national championship when it's all said and done. But I just don't see how Ohio State loses this game, in particular at home. Indiana, it's been a great season, and a lot of credit goes to head coach Tom Allen because of the way that he has turned this program around. Indiana, for the longest time, was a basketball school, and that was the team that we talked about. We talked about their basketball program, and there was not a lot of attention paid to Indiana football, and Tom Allen has certainly made them relevant with a huge win over Penn State, and I know that they are down this year, but to beat Michigan State and to beat Michigan, Rutgers, again, not a program that we feel like is towards the top of the Big Ten by any stretch. But Indiana has played a good season this year. It just seems like it's too tall a task for them to pull off. I want to switch to another program in the Big Ten, and that is the Michigan Wolverines. And it was an embarrassment for them on Saturday at home. Elements weren't good, but they just got embarrassed against Wisconsin. That was not a pretty effort at all. Wisconsin was able to do whatever they wanted in running the football, which was pretty impressive, over 300 yards rushing, and Michigan was not able to really match that effort and intensity. Joe Milton, their starting quarterback, really struggled in the 49-11 loss through a pick that was perhaps one of the worst that I had ever seen. He just, I guess, forgot what color he was wearing because you're wondering whether this linebacker was going to drop it. He was so wide open. So it begs the question about what the outlook is for Michigan for the remainder of this season. They're 1-3. They're out of any semblance of conference or playoff contention. And it's another disappointing and lost season for Jim Harbaugh and the Wolverines, who have time and time again not been able to deliver when they are playing against Ohio State. Harbaugh yet to beat them. They've beat Michigan State only once, and he's yet to beat Wisconsin as well. And this latest setback of 49-11, the seat is warming and the clock is ticking on Jim Harbaugh at Michigan.
100%. And, first of all, as bad as Michigan was on Saturday, credit to Wisconsin because they are, and, shout out to our friend Jimmy Sullivan in that respect. But, Wisconsin is a great program and they seem to be getting better and consistently better. So, good for Badgers fans. You're happy for them. But in terms of the Wolverines here, I think what you got to do specifically with the Jim Harbaugh era mostly is pack it up and say, this didn't work. We took the risk with an NFL coach who wanted to come here. Obviously, this was not an NFL coach that was out of contention for NFL jobs. He wanted to come to Michigan, and he got a lot of money to come to Michigan. But it just didn't work. And I think the best programs are the ones that can understand those kinds of faults and move forward from them. And I hope Harbaugh is also in a position to understand that in himself, as much as he probably won't have much of a say in what happens to him after this is all said and done. But I think if you're Michigan, you kind of got to pack your bags on 2020, as most of us have for all of our hopes and dreams for this calendar year, and say, no, gave it our best shot, didn't work.
The frustrating thing to me is it seems like Michigan has already packed their bags based upon what I saw on Saturday. And there were a number of plays where it just seemed like Michigan wasn't interested in tackling. A number of defenders just making business decisions about not wanting to stick their head in there and tackle Wisconsin ball carriers, because there was one touchdown in particular, and I forget when it happened during the game, but it was a 15-yard carry where a running back goes on a fullback dive and a running back goes on a dive and just scores a touchdown untouched. It's a run right up the middle and nobody touches him. That's just, to me, a lack of wanting to be there and doing what it takes to win in this day and age of college football. And the only thing for me that is questionable now about Jim Harbaugh is are Michigan and their finances. Because when you're talking about the landscape of colleges and the impact of COVID and their financial situations, can they afford to pay Jim Harbaugh $12 million plus whatever he's owed to the rest of his coaching staff to not coach and then bring in another quality candidate? Or will this hamper their ability to find somebody else? I think that's the only question right now. Not that Jim Harbaugh is someone who deserves to stay at Michigan, but rather, is it something that Michigan can do with the financial situation that has affected so many across the country and colleges included? So there's some talk and some buzz about potential NFL interest. I'm not sure I would be terribly high on Jim Harbaugh's return to the NFL with the way this Michigan tenure went. I know that things went well for him in 2014 and dating back to his tenure with the San Francisco 49ers, but 2014 is a long time ago. 2013 and 2014. 2014 was his last year. But that's a long time ago in the NFL, and we'll see if he can regain some semblance of that. Brian Costello wrote an article this morning about it potentially being time in the New York Post about it potentially being time for the Jets to poach Jim Harbaugh from Michigan. I suppose the Jets could do worse, but I'm telling you right now, if I'm a Jets fan or a Giants fan or any team with a head coaching vacancy, I'm not necessarily thrilled about the prospects of Jim Harbaugh coming in to try and turn my team around.
That's not the place you want your coach to be coming from. You know, let's say in 2015, you were a freshman football player at Michigan, and your new coach is coming from the NFL. His decision to want to come and coach for you, that's where you want your coach to be coming from. That's the kind of enthusiasm that will get you behind a coach, that will get you to connect with your coach, that will make you play better. And, you know, the issue that has been to this point in the last few years with the Giants and the Jets is that that's not where their coaches are coming from. Someone who's coming from a place that left them with a bad taste in their mouth. I don't think Harbaugh's done in terms of coaching in the NFL. I just think college didn't work for him. It's a different game, obviously. It's a different scene, specifically in the Big Ten, where things are just big, to put it quite frankly. But I wouldn't count him out of the NFL. But, you know, if I'm a Giants fan, I'm a Jets fan. I'm not hoping for it.
No, I don't think anyone's hoping for him, and we'll see. He does have an accomplished NFL track record, and maybe someone will take a chance. It's just not somewhere that I would love to look. So we will look ahead to some teams in the NFL. We'll finish off our last 12 minutes or so with a buy or sell on the other side of this break. We'll be breaking down whether we are buying the stock on some of the NFL's best teams or selling it away. We'll be back with our last segment of one-on-one on this Wednesday night right after this. Sports Call-In Show on this Wednesday night NBA draft, but we will conclude our nightly one-on-one with some NFL buy or sell. If we get any updates about the craziness that is the NBA, we'll certainly turn to that and keep you updated as I check my phone in between segments to try and see who's picking who and if there are any trades. So we'll pay attention to that stuff as well. We'll get into the NFL and buy or sell, where I will ask Dylan and he will respond, and I will give my 2 cents as well about how we feel about some of the upper echelon teams in the NFL and some of those that are harder to figure out. Dylan, you ready to go?
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. We're going to start with the 7-2 division-leading New Orleans Saints. 2 wins this year over Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Are you buying or selling the New Orleans Saints, especially in recent with the light of Drew Brees being injured and now them having to turn to Jameis Winston?
Yeah, so if this had not happened to Drew Brees, and was it a couple days ago this happened, right? Am I correct in thinking that? The days, of course, the days of quarantine are all lost to me. But regardless, this is not happening to Drew Brees. I'm buying, no doubt. But being without Drew Brees for the foreseeable future, I guess, makes me question if they're going to be able to fend off their opponents in the South. But I like Jameis Winston. I think he's a talent at quarterback. Weird guy, but a talent at quarterback. I think he's going to work in that position for this time period, whatever it may be. So overall, after reviewing the options, I'm going to buy the New Orleans Saints for the 2020 season. How about you, Nick?
Yeah, I'm going to buy them as well, and I think that they are one of the top 2. I'm maybe it's a stretch to say they're the best team in the NFC, but they're certainly top 2. I think Green Bay is right up there with them. I've been concerned with what I've seen out of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers recently, although they were able to get back into the win column. I'm just not a huge fan of what Tampa Bay has done, and in particular against New Orleans, and a 38-3 drubbing is certainly something that you're going to pay attention to. New Orleans has been really good offensively, and we know that they're a team that's predicated on offense and they're going to score points. And I think Jameis Winston can do enough to keep that going because they've got incredible weapons. Alvin Kamara is as good a running back as there is in the NFL, and Michael Thomas is as good a wide receiver as there is in the NFL. And I think Jameis Winston, with a more streamlined approach and taking care of the football, can make them effective and maybe even add a dimension in the deep passing game that Drew Brees wasn't able to master, or certainly is not something that's there for him at this stage of his career. So I really like where the Saints are at right now. I think they're a top 2 team, as I said, in the NFC. So I'm certainly buying the Saints. And I know Drew Brees is going to be out. It looks like 3 to 4 to 5 weeks. Not really sure exactly what the prognosis is going to be for him. They said 2 or 3. But traditionally, it seems like maybe a little bit longer, especially since he's searching on a second opinion. So it might be Jameis Winston for a few weeks now. But New Orleans is good enough that they're going to be able to find wins with Winston at quarterback. And if they get Drew Brees back for the playoffs, this is going to be a team that is going to be effective going into the postseason, and I think can make a real run for a potential Super Bowl. That's how well and how highly I think the Saints are playing right now. Let's move to the Arizona Cardinals, who have moved into a tie atop the NFC West at 6-3 with a miracle Hail Mary win. DeAndre Hopkins catching a ball at the end over 3 Buffalo Bills. I'm not thrilled by what happened. No secret. It was incredible. One of the best plays, if not the best play of the NFL season. An incredible catch by Hopkins and an incredibly lucky win that the Cardinals were able to get. But regardless, it does go into the win column for Arizona. Dylan, are you buying or selling the NFC West leading Arizona Cardinals?
Look, Odell Beckham Jr.'s one-handed catch that I don't even need to give any more information. Everyone knows what I'm talking about. That didn't put the Giants in the playoffs. obviously takes more than a miracle play. That's a game I think the Bills should have won, had it not been for such a stroke of good fortune, if you will, for the Cardinals. So I'm not ready to buy them because I also don't think they're the best team in their division, but we'll talk more about that. So if not buy, then what else other than sell? So I'm gonna sell the Cardinals at the moment, but maybe I'll regret that.
I think you will. I'm buying the Arizona Cardinals, and I think they're one of the better teams in the NFC. If you look at the outlook with their division, I'm not a huge fan of the Los Angeles Rams. I think they're up and down and too inconsistent offensively, especially at the quarterback position and then into the running game. And their defense has been spotty at times, although they've played better as of late. Seattle has some inconsistency, to say it politely, on their defense. They have really struggled against the pass and have been just really atrocious on that side of the ball. There's no other way to put it. They have really, really struggled on the defensive side of the football, but Russell Wilson in that offensive attack keeps them in every game that they play in. So I think I'm not ready to move off Seattle as of yet, but Arizona, I think, is one of, if not the best team in that division. I think it's them and Seattle that are right there vying for it, and we're lucky to get to take that in on Thursday night. I love what Arizona's done. I think Kyler Murray is as dynamic as they come out of the quarterback position. I really like what he's been able to do. DeAndre Hopkins, it goes without saying, the weapon that he is on the outside. Kenyon Drake with some of the weapons they have, and a defense that has not been fantastic but is getting better. And you have confidence in their secondary's ability to grow if they can get some pass rush. So I like what I've seen out of Arizona. Yes, they lucked out with a win over a Bills team that I think is really good, and we're going to get to them next. But I'll buy Arizona, not necessarily because of what I saw on Sunday, other than they kept it close and they played a really competitive game against a good team. Yes, they ended up winning, but I don't think it was about winning or losing that game that proves to me whether or not I should be buying or selling them. It was the way they played it, and I'm buying Arizona. So on to the Bills, who are on the other side of that crushing loss. They're at 7-3, half a game up in the AFC East over the Miami Dolphins, who are surging. Are you buying or selling the Bills?
I'm buying the Bills. I've been a secret Bills fan for a few years now, and I know that it probably makes you very happy to hear. But I truly mean that. I think they have been on the uprise. Their rise to the position they're in right now, I think, has taken some time. I don't think anyone's going to doubt that. But I think they're reaping the benefits of what they have sowed. I think they're the best team in their division by far. And I think they're going to surprise people, actually, when it comes playoff time. I think they're going to really make a difference in the AFC. I don't know if they're going to the AFC Championship game. I don't know if I'll say that, but I like them a lot. It's a buy. It's a flat out buy.
I agree. I like what I've seen from the Bills, and they've played a really difficult schedule. They've played 7 teams with a winning record. The next team in the NFL has played 4, and they have weathered the storm through a number of difficult games, and they are a Hail Mary pass away from being 8-2 and 5-2 against teams with winning records. So I've been really impressed with what they've done for the duration of this season. Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs has been a great connection, and you're hoping that can continue. But they didn't even play that well against Arizona. That, I think, is the encouraging thing for Bills Mafia. They didn't play well, and especially in that second half, and they were still 34 seconds and a Hail Mary away from winning a game against a really difficult opponent. Last one before we get out of here. How are you feeling about Baltimore after that crushing loss to New England?
It's a crushing loss, and New England isn't the greatest of teams. Like, I'm not really high on them right now, but I still have faith in the Ravens. I do. I think they can squeeze through in their division just to maybe grab a wild card. And they also have the benefit, something we talked about earlier in the show, is they're playing NFC East teams. That's something you really like seeing on the schedule. So I'm going to buy the Ravens.
I'm concerned about Baltimore. I'm selling them. Their offense is not as dynamic as it was a year ago. Their defense is not there either. I know they've had some injuries, but with Lamar Jackson and the way that he has regressed, And that offense, it's concerning. And I don't know that their defense that has played well at times is good enough to carry them in a division where they are playing against some really difficult opponents and an AFC that is really good. There are a number of teams that are really good in the AFC. So I'm going to have to sell Baltimore right now. I know the weather wasn't good, but it's just about their offense, and you don't know that they can necessarily keep up on the holistic effort. You never know. They can turn it around, and they were a team that was really successful last year. So I'm not completely selling them. I'm not burying them, and I may change my tune on them in a couple weeks. But right now I'm selling, especially after a really concerning loss to the New England Patriots on Sunday night. That's it for us here on One Nightly. If you missed any of tonight's segments or special features, they will be available on demand on WFUV Sports' Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube pages. Special thanks to our producer, Alex Woles, for Dylan Palsamo. I'm Nick DeLuca. Thanks for hanging out with us. One-on-One, as always, is a production of WFUV Sports.